Hi, everyone, and welcome. Today is the 29th of the Hebrew month of Adar, the final day of the month of Adar. And tonight we greet the new moon of the month of Nisan, the month of Passover. Deborah, we're so grateful to you for your teaching, and thank you so much for leading us today.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone. I'd like to begin on the theme of freedom that's going to be taken up so richly in these coming days. Different ways that Jews talk about freedom, different vocabulary that we have, different images that we use, both biblically and post-biblically. This time of year, we talk about freedom from the point of view of being removed from danger. Obviously, slavery in Egypt was a grave danger, of rescuing toward freedom, of being redeemed, of being spared, including spared from the plagues themselves, assisted through signs, wonders, and miracles. That's an experience of freedom too. And of course, we were reminded of our own agency to participate in our own liberation. Finally, we're elevated as royal creations in God's image. That's why we lean left at the Passover Seder, to remind ourselves that it is a birthright to be free, and it doesn't just belong to Pharaoh. There are four main verbs that are used, and these are the four verbs that the rabbis say give us the four cups. There's some discussion of a fifth verb elsewhere, but in the main, the four verbs are in front of you on the screen, and in the Hebrew, they're highlighted in color. And they come from Exodus chapter 6. Hotseti, I will take you out, I will remove you. Hitzalti, I will rescue you, I will save you. Ga'alti, I will redeem you. Lakachti, I will take you to me for a nation. These are the four verbs, the four promises that give us so many of the other fours that we experience at the Passover Seder. And I want to talk a little bit about each of the four, and then we'll go into a meditation about them. Hotseti is removal from danger. Nothing can happen until that happens. You have to be out from under fire, out from under the thumb of the taskmaster or the tyrant. And then Hitzalti, because it's not enough to get out of Egypt, you have to also get Egypt out of you. You have to rescue or be rescued from all the after effects of an oppressive or traumatic experience. It's not over when it's over. There are lingering effects and they have to be addressed. And the symbol for that is the breaking of chains. Rabbi Dean Steinsaltz said, between ceasing to be a slave and acquiring freedom, the individual must thus pass through an intermediate stage in his progress without which he cannot become truly free. He must develop inner qualities of his own. That relates to the next two of the verbs that appear in Exodus 6. Ga'alti. Ga'alti refers to a redemptive spiritual kind of freedom, a freedom that has nothing to do with what's going on outside of you, not even the lingering effects of what happened to you. Tonight begins Rosh Chodesh, and it is curious that this announcement of a new time and the moment by which new years will forever after be counted happens while they are still abjectly enslaved. The last of the plagues hasn't even happened yet. And yet Moses and Aaron are told, HaChodesh hazel lachem Rosh Chodeshim. This month shall be for you a new month, because there is a quality of spiritual freedom that can arise even when external circumstances are more than dreadful. And of course, a slave is someone who cannot control or manage their own time. So by naming time, by declaring this is the way we're going to count the months, it was a statement of agency and freedom. And in fact, after this is the first time that the Israelites do something to promote their own liberation rather than just receiving help from Moses or Aaron or God. They paint the doorposts with the blood of an animal that the Egyptians considered a deity, to assert themselves and to be active in the Exodus and the rebellion. The last of the verbs is lakachti. I will take you to me. This is an embracing idea. We're entering into a new relationship. And a lot of people associate lakachti with what happens at Sinai, that God embraces the Jewish people fully. And it can only happen that the Jewish people will in turn also embrace God fully after all these other stages of freedom have been achieved. And we'll see that the Torah itself states they couldn't even hear Moses initially because of the constraints on them, including the effect on their spirit. Now, with more freedom on the outside and a beginning of the dawn of freedom on the inside, they can enter into a new relationship with each other, with God, with their leadership. Now, when I say lakachti, we take, it can have this affect of holding on tightly. And that's not the connotation I mean. I love this poem from John O'Donohue that explains it this way. As a bird soars high in the free holding of the wind, clear of the certainty of the ground, opening the imagination of wind, into the grace of emptiness, may your life awaken to the call of its freedom. So the lakachti doesn't come from a place of grasping, but a place of free holding. That is real liberation, clearing a space, having enough spaciousness, rochba, as opposed to Mitzrayim, narrowness, to let something new and different and more free arrive. Now, everything that I've been saying comports with a famous teaching by Isaiah Berlin about two types of freedom, what he calls negative and positive liberty. Hotzeti hitzalti is primarily about external constraints. What are the things that are impeding me from the outside? And you can also look at it that ga'alti lakachti, I will redeem you and I will take you, are aspects of self-mastery that apply more internally than externally. Now, I've been talking about the slavery that happened in the 15th to the 13th century BCE to our people, and we're still talking about it, and we'll talk about it at our Seders because it matters, and because this is the essential foundational narrative of our people, that we must always remember we were slaves in the land of Egypt, that we might love the stranger. Nevertheless, slavery is not over. As the anti-trafficker Maurice Middleburg likes to say, slavery is illegal everywhere, but it's practiced everywhere, including in the United States and in Israel. I love this photo of former slave because she looks so regal. There was a time she needed Hotzeti to be taken out, Hitzalti, someone to help liberate and rescue her. She did the hard work of Ga'alti, of finding her own spirituality and her own inner freedom, finding her own voice. And now she can be in this relationship with others where she's helping to free other people. Look how regal she is. She owns her status as a free woman. This year, I'm raising funds for Breaking the Chain Through Education, a charity out of New Jersey that helps former child slaves from Ghana. The man in the yellow shirt, the white man pictured here, is Evan Robbins, and he has built a school where he assists and mentors and provides healthcare and education and all sorts of therapies for liberated children, many of whom he's had a hand in liberating, who did dangerous work on the fishing boats on Lake Volta in Ghana. And you can see here 3 young men who were liberated in 2010 to 2012. So when they were quite young, and now all 3 are electricians, and you see the resilience here. You can learn more at btcte.org. Last thing I want to point out before we go into our meditation is that the verses preceding and following the four core verbs, remove, deliver, redeem, and take, all have the word Shema in them. I have heard the moaning of the Israelites, God says. Moses questions whether Pharaoh or the Jewish people will listen to him. And in fact, the Israelites wouldn't listen to him because their spirits and their bodies were so crushed. So this inner listening is the work that we're doing now. Listening is a work that can facilitate freedom of all four kinds that we've mentioned. Rabbi Steinsaltz says slavery is that condition in which a person is always subject to the will of another. That's the negative freedom of Isaiah Berlin. That's what we need to be taken out and rescued from. Freedom, on the other hand, is the ability to act upon and carry out one's own independent will. And that means, among other things, not just following your thoughts, but paying attention and directing your thoughts, setting your intentions, and so much more. Let's take some time to do that now. We'll delve into each of these four action words with the intention of becoming more free. So please allow your eyes to close and take a moment to make sure you're in a comfortable posture. Keep yourself supported and aligned. Feel the seat beneath you. And if any part of your body is touching the floor, just feel the ground supporting you. You can take 3 deep mindful breaths. Consider the word hotseti. I've taken you out. What do you need to be removed from in order to be more free? And what might you need to remove from within yourself in order to be more free? If you choose to, conjure in your mind's eye the image of parting waters. What in your life or in your observation of the world needs an exodus of simply leaving, being taken out, going? Let's take another few quiet moments with Hotseti. I will take you out. Now consider Hitsalti. I have delivered you. Leave behind that image, if you still had it, of going out of the parted waters. And consider what it means to say, I have delivered you, I have saved you, I have rescued you. Do you need to be delivered from some past trauma or mistreatment? What consequences of past mistreatment may still need healing? Is there something impeding your freedom that's not oppression or bondage or constriction today, but the after effect of those things? Visualize in your mind's eye, if you can, the image of breaking chains. Are there consequences to your body or your mind or your spirit from habits or patterns that you undertook at one point which do not serve you well? Imagine being delivered of those consequences. Imagine the pattern is broken and you're fully rescued from whatever hampered your freedom in the past. What does that look like to you? We'll take a few quiet moments. Now let that go and consider Ga'alti, I've redeemed you. There is a spiritual redemptive freedom that has nothing to do with what happened in the past. It is a shift toward the present. Whatever happened or didn't happen, you own this moment. You can choose right now to use it for healing and for freedom. Chodesh Hazelachem Rosh Chodashim. This month is yours to shape. It's something entirely new. A new present and a new future are being formed by the Chodesh, the month that is Chadash, new. Imagine, if you can, a rising sun in your mind's eye and see the light rising and growing. And picture that, or just hearing these words. Can you also feel the light of freedom rising and growing in you? Imagine an orb of light rising from your heart and spreading throughout your body, bringing freedom and confidence that you can and will redeem and be redeemed. We'll take one more quiet moment. Let the light of spiritual redemptive freedom continue to shine in you continually in the background. And switch your focus to Lakachti. I have taken you to me. This is the freedom of entering newly into relationships and covenants. See if you can deliberately open your heart space and imagine your heart opening more fully than it already is. Is there anyone whose love you have not been fully receiving? Try to let that in just a little bit more. When you receive God's love for you, even if you don't believe in God, even if you're angry at God, can you let a universal, great, holy love in that has been knocking? Kol dodi dofek. However you relate to others or higher power, and you open your heart to yourself in compassion. You might want to put your hand over your heart. Lakachti. I have taken you to me. Now, recalling the image from the Sistine Chapel with the intention of freely receiving and giving love, no obstacles in the way. Gently touch your two index fingers together. And take a deep breath. And bring your two hands together. And take a deep breath. And gently rub your hands together. And open your eyes.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Debra. Really an extraordinary teaching and meditation experience for us today. Of course, we know there's a fifth promise, right? Which is symbolized at the Seder by Kos Eliyahu, Elijah's cup. So, of course, I and maybe others who might have been thinking about that, if we were to extend our sit a little bit longer, is there a way you would work that into this in terms of that spiritual process, you think?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's Heveti, which is
Right.
the bringing into the land of Israel, which is the idealized, the promised land.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of another level and another layer. It's a struggle. And I mentioned it just parenthetically, there's four, but sometimes five, 2 Jews, 3
Right.
opinions, 4 cups, 5 cups. I think the reason I stuck with the 4, partly in the interest of time, but also because these 4 are the 4 cups of this world. By definition, Elijah's cup is the world of announcing the Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
It's because Elijah announced the Messiah. It's the cup of grand aspirations of when you get to the promised land and all is well and everything is as it should be. And I think that's not where we are.
Right. It's the messianic.
It's
That's the
it's a
messianic.
messianic vision, and it's an
right.
important aspirational vision to have before us. But I think when thinking about freedom, it's putting a little too much pressure on us.
Mm-hmm.
That's L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim. That's
Mm-hmm.
next year in Jerusalem. That we can get there, but we're not going to get there in this sit. We're not going to get there in this moment. The others, I think, are all available to us in this moment.
And then I'd like to ask you to unpack a little bit more the progression that quote from it's Isaiah Berlin, where the first two promises are related to external constraints, right, on our freedom, and the second are related to internal constraints on our freedom. And I really was struck by and thought, wow, that really works. That the first of the external constraints are really the external constraints, and the second, kind of the remnants of those external constraints as we experience them, like those constraints are maybe gone. For example, whatever, it might be family of origin stuff, right?
Mhm.
Where people were directly impacted in real time by those issues. And it may be the time has passed, those people are no longer there, and yet the impact is still present.
I want to say about that, Mark, I'm really glad that it worked for you and it worked for me too. But I also want to say, I'm sure, however many people are on here, 120 plus, it's not going to work for everybody. And this is a construct. It's
Right.
not, it's all constructs are flawed and nothing is perfectly sequential and all of that. But I do think it's talking about a kind of a hierarchy of needs. First, I have to get away from the physical external pressures. Then I can deal with the immediate aftermath of that. Then I see how I may have internalized it, how I may be
Mhm.
responding in ways that are not helpful to myself or to others. And finally, I, from that place, can build better relationships. So let me give a specific example that I think will illustrate it well. If you think about an addiction, you start off, I'm addicted to alcohol, let's say. First, I have to get out from under. I have to stop being in the bar. I have to remove myself or be removed. And then I can be a dry drunk. I'm still dealing with all the same issues. I'm just white knuckling my way through it. That's hitzalti. That's the second stage. Then at some point, the light begins to dawn. I start to feel that, not that I have control, because Alcoholics Anonymous is famously about, I don't have perfect control, but I can make choices. I can exercise my agency of how I'm going to behave today and where I'm going to put my thoughts. And that's the beginning of Ga'alti. That's the beginning of redemption, even if it's still hard, even if there's biological reasons why I'm still addicted to alcohol, even if I grew up with people who are alcoholics, etc. And then finally, that impacts your relationships, lakachti, your relationship with yourself. You develop more self-trust. It impacts your relationship with others. People can trust you more. You're more fully present because you're not taken away by this oppression of alcohol that has kidnapped you until now. And you can begin to be a sponsor perhaps and help someone else. So it embraces the relationships in a whole new way too. You create new covenants that wouldn't have been possible before.
That's a beautiful answer and a beautiful way of describing that process. We often think about this practice, this Jewish mindfulness practice, Jewish mindfulness meditation practice, as a kind of Shabbat practice. Like Shabbat is a good Jewish, frame for the practice. And of course, now when you're describing the kind of the liberation model that Passover offers us, in addition to the guide, the guidance you took us through today, you guided us through those four kind of phases. Do you think we can describe Jewish mindfulness meditation in general as a kind of Passover liberation practice that we engage in every day? Shabbat, I mean, it happens weekly, and yet it's a constant practice. And Passover happens once a year, and it's also a constant practice.
I believe it was Heschel who said that redemption must be earned each day. It's a beautiful observation that we're doing freedom all the time. We have a special concentration on it, but obviously we say the micha mocha daily, multiple times a day. We're constantly needing to free ourselves and also to receive the love and the freedom and the redemption and the attempt to rescue that are coming our way. That's part of the first two also, is sometimes we don't even realize what's coming to us to help us, and we're unknowingly, unconsciously pushing it away. And to me, the value of a meditation practice in relation to these four is that you stop focusing so much on the external, which of course can be horrible, but is also largely out of your control.
Right.
And instead, you begin to focus on what's within my power. Is there some way I can remove or be removed? Is there a way that I can deliver myself or appeal to someone to help me be delivered. And then the last two, very much more internal. How can I be a participant in my own liberation? How can I pay attention to the spiritual freedom that is always mine, regardless of external circumstances? Part of that spiritual freedom is, where am I going to put my focus right now? That's a lot of what meditation to me is about. It's a rehearsal of that, so that when we get out into the fray of the world, we're hopefully less reactive and more able to cultivate those lakachti relationships of embracing ourselves with compassion, embracing other people with compassion.
Amen, but amen. I mean, beautifully said. Boy, this was a keeper today, Deborah. Really, it was really worth visiting and revisiting. I want to encourage people actually who are here who found it especially powerful to let people know about it, especially people who are interested in preparing for Passover or even during Passover itself. I think this is a really such a powerful practice and accessible and kind of a bite-sized but deep, deep, deep dive into what Pesach is about. So thanks for leading us so beautifully right into Nissan. Deborah, thank you so much.
Thank you, and Chodesh Tov, everyone.
Chodesh Tov. Many blessings.